With the clouds hanging heavy in the Klondike sky in mid-September, Tony Beets, king of the Klondike, was hurrying to achieve his 5,000-ounce goal. But his trial didn't result in anything. So is it over for Tony Beets after digging up this terrifying discovery in the gold rush? Let's find out. Ever since the digging began, it looked like a serious challenge, but Tony was optimistic. His major target was the 80 Pup Cut, where there had been a recent discovery of over 500 OZ, channel gold. The veins looked good, the pay was high, and Tony was determined to keep the gold coming. But Tony only had 900 ounces, and the weather was fooling his plans. It began to rain, and the field became a muddy obstacle. Regardless, Tony, accustomed to being in full command of the situation, could not help worrying about the effect on their work. He was fully aware of the dangers involved, and now he had to confront a new reality. I find his determination to be very inspiring, but this challenge was way bigger than his. 12 weeks ago, Tony had made up his mind about working 7 days a week for 24 hours. This was proof of his determination to push past all obstacles. One thing he did was double the flow of water from the tunnel to settle with the surroundings. It was certainly an even bolder undertaking. The object was simple: more gold. Tony, as always ambitious, bore responsibility for matters that had occurred earlier in the year. But the settling ponds were inadequately reinforced, and there were already signs of trouble there. The team reported over the radio that several dikes had broken. To deal with that, Tony faced a difficult decision. He had to close up shop so he could raise and anchor the dikes. It was a move that had to be made, but it cost valuable time in the gold rush. Still, they kept working and sweating to prevent water from getting where it shouldn't, because the 80 Pup Cut couldn't wait. With the water levels once again on the rise, Tony was fighting against them. There was no way he could allow the weather to determine his mining fortune. He emphasized sternly that you don't want to mess with your ponds. Tony issued orders for his staff to embark on the task as a matter of urgency. They entrusted Nick, one of Tony's reliable crew members, to keep a special eye on this unnecessary piece next to the pump. The water just kept coming, and the rain never seemed to stop. It was clear that Tony was very concerned for the dikes, and everyone had to act fast. He thought of the difficulties they were encountering and worried that he would sink here. I think in a situation like this, patience and vigilance work best. It was a battle with nature, and Tony was right there in the blood and sweat of it. Reality set in. Digging for gold wasn't a game of polishing bright little chunks on the patio. It was a struggle with time, weather, and the constantly changing moods of AM. Thinking about these obstacles, I can't help but be curious. Will Tony Beets break through all this and reach his 5,000-ounce gold goal? The 80 Pup had its own shimmer, but with rain and rising bodies of water opposing him, his chances were not good. He was struggling to survive while the sound of machinery was still reverberating from all over the landscape. Their excavator got jammed in a settling pond, and Tony realized that huge money would be lost every day if this heavy equipment could not do its job. There was nothing else they could do but stop. Yes, it was a problem, a big problem. It was obvious that the mining operation would have to be suspended until the problem was resolved, but Cousin Mike found a fix. He went to the place in the morning and tried his best, but ended up sinking his excavator straight down into the water. This led to another problem. Needing a solution, Tony went out on an emergency rescue with 2 other excavators. Despite all their hard work, they had no luck. The time had come for troops, and Tony didn't flinch at bringing in the big boys, the 18T D6 dozer and the colossal 115T D1. The question then was how to get that stubborn excavator out of the muddy bog. With his many years of mining experience, Tony made a plan that unfolded with precision. The first step was to bail out the water. For this purpose, a heavy piece of equipment, the D6 dozer, was mobilized to push fine tailings into the pit and form a ramp. The plan was to stabilize the ground under the stalled excavator in preparation for the big wrestler to pull it out. After that, the colossal 115 TD1 850 horsepower rescue mission star was used to go on patrol and see if it could help. Tony devised a way to drive the D11 onto the reinforced ramp, building a platform for this powerful machine to get up on. The goal was clear: free the 220 excavators stuck in the mud. It was obvious the situation was grave and time was limited, but every decision had a cost. Tony Beets understood the risks and thought of how to resolve the issue. I couldn't help but wonder, Would Tony succeed with his plan? When the engines started roaring and the machinery began turning, it was all hands on deck, as this became a battlefield between man and nature. Extracting an excavator was not a mere piece of cake. It was also a challenge in terms of the ability to cope with unexpected circumstances, skills, and experience in the harsh world of gold mining. The defeat that Tony Beets was dealing with reverberated throughout the mines. In order to extract the excavator, the water had to be pumped out. It surely acted as a challenge to the muddy swamp of crisis that had ensnared Tony's mining operation. Yet, true to his own nature, Tony Beets was not the kind of man to give in. He believed that they were going to make a little progress here. So I believe it was beginning to look up. Scenes of rescuers rescuing the stranded excavator flashed on the screen. The D6 dozer was recruited to push the tailings, and a rudimentary ramp was constructed for the rescue effort. They had to tread a fine line between machine and nature, which Tony Beets resolved to lead right across. As the plan got further along, the settling pond became less quagmire-like. He noticed that things were going in the right direction. The visual exploration of this swampy landscape also reflected the hardships for the miners on Paradise Hill. As the excavator work progressed, I could not help but ask myself, was this another blow to Tony Beets' time? On top of this, the constant enemy Klondike rain has already delayed production on Paradise Hill all week. Although the pressure was building, Tony had his sights set on the 500-ounce target and remained optimistic. Earlier, they lost about 2 hours as a result of the excavator incident. Mike's cousin, who accidentally drove the excavator into the mud, apparently had to bear the blame. Tony, not one to sugarcoat words, damply retorted that Mike was being stuck because the guy didn't listen carefully. With a misplaced excavator and an operation delayed, will Tony Beets and his crew be able to recover from this blow? Even he himself knew that some of his problems stemmed from neglecting details. They added a moment of comedy to the experience by saying that he had to explain everything in English, Dutch, or Finnish. The challenge of rescuing Tony from difficult situations naturally improved Tony's engineering skills. All we can do is marvel at the fortitude of Tony Beets and his team as the episode progresses. The question remained, could Tony Beets get past this horrifying discovery? Or was it really over for Tony Beets? They had found gold and were going to measure its weight to see if they had achieved their goal. Tony Beets was on a roller coaster of sorts, one that involved numbers. The implications were immense, and the number of ounces was even greater. 9 diggers called out the count as they swept through the mining area, 10, 30, and so forth to keep family on track. While it was an encouraging number for some investors at this point, Tony would need over 300 ounces to achieve his goal. Then the count grew tense. 240, 250, 260. The numbers continued climbing, from highs to ever higher peaks, as he and the others sifted through rock after rock. They were either right or wrong in their entire mining endeavor. The ounces kept coming. 350, 360. 1987's production was more than $500,000. It was worth $850,000, bringing their total to 4,601 ounces. In 6 days, they had worked hard to reach an impressive result. The success was due in part to the harvests from the 80 pup. Tony knew that, but at least they recognized what 80 pup could do. That has been doing pretty well for a while now. Tony glanced back to the future in hopes of an even better total receipt. So even if there was the time-consuming but vital task of slinging for a day, as long as gold flowed, that's what counted. It wasn't a problem for the gunslingers. The success was undeniable, and Tony could only say from their experience that if it paid well, then it was all right. I found it quite confusing and wondered if the weather wouldn't end up spoiling Tony's goals. Tony was quite satisfied with the result. The friendship and common success were so evident in the piece that it created a kind of identification with the miners struggling against nature for gold. The never-ending quest for gold has been rewarded for now, at least. Feel free to watch my earlier videos and subscribe for further revelations in this ever-changing world.